Hey everyone, welcome to Booga Buggie Kid Stories and the extra special part 2 of this 2-part adventure where Booga Buggie and his friends have already found the lost city of Atlantis, and Booga Buggie is about to use his special plan so that everyone can see Atlantis. Let's find out how it goes. Lulu, Ferga, and Gurga were patiently waiting for Booga Buggie to come back. Booga Buggie had left because he had a plan to make sure that everyone could see the lost city of Atlantis. And while they waited, they wondered what his plan would be. Ferga was the first person to spot something weird off in the distance. It looked really colorful, and it was coming at them super quick. And closer, all of that color came, and they saw Booga Buggie. And right behind Booga Buggie was all of that color. And as Booga Buggie got closer and closer, that's when they realized the color was balloons. Thousands and thousands of giant balloons. All sorts of colors, blue and green and pink and orange and red, zooming right behind Booga Buggie. Booga Buggie was a little bit out of breath by the time he got back to his friends. So he caught his breath and then explained the plan. He had filled up all of these balloons with special Booga Buggie gas, and he was going to tie all of the balloons to Atlantis and float Atlantis all the way up to the top of the ocean. That way, people could take boats and see Atlantis. What a great idea, thought Ferga, Gurga, and Lulu. So they all grabbed a bunch of balloons, took the strings, and swam or took the submarine to all different parts of the lost city. And they tied it to the buildings and the statues and the Welcome to Atlantis sign and all over Atlantis at the bottom of the ocean. Once all of the balloons were tied everywhere, Booga Buggie went around to each balloon and finished filling them up with a special Booga Buggie gas. They had only been half full when he brought them, and he knew he had to fill them up all the way to float this really heavy city. And so as he finished filling them up, Atlantis started to float. The entire city started to float higher and higher in the ocean. Woohoo! We did it, they all thought. And they hopped in the submarine, and Booga Buggie in his scuba gear, and they followed the Atlantis all the way up to the top of the ocean. Just as Atlantis was getting really close to the surface of the ocean, Booga Buggie, Ferga, Gurga, and Lulu all made sure they were on top or even inside of some of the buildings of Atlantis, because it was a fun ride going from the bottom of the ocean to the top. And finally, they had made it to the surface of the ocean. They were going to call all of their friends and family and everyone they knew to come take a look. But then something unexpected happened. The lost city of Atlantis didn't stop rising when it got to the top of the ocean. Nope, it kept rising. It was above the surface of the water, and it was starting to float into the air. Whoa, what's going on? Thought Booga Buggie. This wasn't supposed to happen. Atlantis kept getting higher and higher, and the ocean was looking smaller and smaller. Booga Buggie crawled over to the side of Atlantis, looked down, and to his surprise, the earth started to get smaller and smaller and smaller. Booga Buggie worried what they were going to do. Atlantis was starting to float up into space. Booga Buggie thought to himself, it's a good thing he still had his scuba gear on so he could breathe in space. And Ferga, Gurga, and Lulu were in their different submarines, and they still had air inside of that. But Earth still got smaller, and they were floating and floating and floating really far away. And that's when Booga Buggie spotted this rock out in space. And he realized, that's actually the moon. Well, we don't want to keep floating away into outer space for forever. So he quickly crawled over to where Lulu was and said, hey, Lulu, quickly, use your pterodactyl wings and guide us to the moon over there. So Lulu flapped her wings and helped the flying city of Atlantis glide really close to the moon. Lulu the pterodactyl was able to get them really close to the moon, but Booga Buggie realized that they weren't going to get close enough and that they were still going to float past, probably to Mars or Venus or Uranus or some other planet, but that was too far away for them. So Booga Buggie thought and came up with another idea. Booga Buggie ran to get some extra rope that he hadn't yet used for his balloons and tied that to one of the big buildings of Atlantis, and on the other end tied it to Lulu the pterodactyl and her submarine. And Lulu flew in space away from the floating city of Atlantis towards the moon. And when Lulu landed on the moon, she quickly tied this rope to the moon. That way, the floating city of Atlantis would be tethered to the moon and wouldn't keep floating away. Meanwhile, back on Earth, Elon was pretty interested in stars and the moon and outer space, and he had rented a telescope from the library. And this was a particularly clear night with no clouds in the sky. And he wanted to look up at that big rock in the sky that we call the moon. So he peered through the telescope. What is going on? Elon thought. There's something tied to the moon. Elon quickly ran and got his dad and his mom and Pfeiffer and told them to all look through the telescope. And they did. And they saw the exact same thing that Elon had saw. There was some crazy city that was tied to the moon, and it looked like it was floating there with a whole bunch of colorful balloons. It was really hard to miss because it was so colorful. Elon was so excited that he spotted this crazy thing in space. He called all of his friends and his family, and he told everyone they knew, and even the news heard about it. And so all over the world, everyone was able to see this lost city of Atlantis floating up in space. Back out in outer space, Booga Buggie, Ferga, Gurga, and Lulu were wondering how on Earth are they going to get back to Earth? I mean, how on the moon are they going to get back to Earth? And as they were thinking, that's when Booga Buggie noticed some movement in one of the buildings. Booga Buggie crawled over to that building, and Booga Buggie was able to sneak inside, and somehow that old Atlantis building was able to keep all of that ocean water inside, and it hasn't frozen from being in outer space either. And what he noticed was over in the corner, there was a big pufferfish. Now, pufferfish are really cool fish. They have some spikes that poke out of their skin, and if they get scared or they want to scare away someone else that's trying to eat them, they can actually blow themselves up into a really big ball. They can get up to about 3 feet big. Now this pufferfish was pretty scared, and so he had blown himself up as big as he can, both to scare away Booga Buggie, and he was scared because he's never left the ocean before. But Booga Buggie swam over to him and introduced himself in a really friendly voice, saying, "Hi, Mr. Pufferfish, I'm Booga Buggie." That had made the pufferfish a little bit less scared, so he deflated himself. And the pufferfish said to Booga Buggie, "My name is Perseus, the pufferfish." Booga Buggie asked Perseus if he could inflate himself again to be really big and pokey. And Perseus said, yeah, sure, it's super easy to do. We can do that whenever we want when we get scared. Aha! Booga Buggie said, I know exactly how we're going to get back to Earth. Perseus, grab all your other pufferfish friends and tell them to inflate with my special Booga Buggie gas. Perseus went around and gathered a school of pufferfish that had also hidden in that building. Booga Buggie had lined them up one by one right after each other and opened the windows in that building and said, on the count of 3, blow your special Booga Buggie gas out as fast as you can. And just before you do that, Lulu, you cut the rope that we're attached to for the moon. So Lulu cut the rope, and Booga Buggie counted 1, 2, 3. Back on Earth, all of the humans had been watching what was going on. They were looking through telescopes, and the news was showing it too. They had seen the lost city of Atlantis floating by the moon, and then all of a sudden, just like a rocket ship, whoosh, it was heading straight back for Earth. It looked like Lulu the pterodactyl was using her wings to guide the city where it needed to go back to Earth. And then there were some really pokey balls that looked like were the rocket engines blasting them back to Earth. As the city was getting closer and closer and closer, Booga Buggie took some of those pufferfish and he grabbed them and he poked some of the balloons. That way, the city wouldn't keep floating away, and it was getting closer and closer to the Earth. It had almost touched down on the Earth, and psh, splash, right into the ocean. But they had left just enough balloons on it so that it wouldn't sink, but it would stay floating right on top of the ocean. Meanwhile, Elon, his dad, Pfeiffer, and his mom had hopped in their truck and rushed over to the beach because Atlantis was going to crash down on the ocean right by their house. So they raced there just as it was touching the surface of the water. Booga Buggie, Ferga, Gurga, and Lulu were so excited to be back on Earth. They thanked Perseus and the school of pufferfish so much for helping save them. And Perseus and all of his friends decided to stick around in the city of Atlantis and their new home in this different part of the ocean they hadn't explored before. So after saying goodbye, Booga Buggie, Ferga, Gurga, and Lulu all went home to take a rest from their crazy adventure about finding Atlantis. They were so excited that they found it, and now everyone else on Earth got to enjoy it too. Elon was also very excited because he had a new city to explore. He had to be pretty careful because pufferfish are actually poisonous, but they were friendly, so they didn't want to hurt him either. And so Elon and his family got to explore the city of Atlantis. Hey everyone, thanks for joining along in this crazy adventure where Booga Buggie and his friends meet a new friend Perseus, all while finding Atlantis at the bottom of the ocean, taking it to the moon, and back to Earth again. Please rate or review this podcast wherever you listen to it. That helps other people find it too. And stick around for more episodes. Bye for now.